This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to this episode of A Visit to the Mound. I'm Lark Smith, and he is
Stan Huff.
We have a special guest today whose name you may not know, but he's someone you probably have seen. Like my buddy Stan, Barry Moss spent the majority of his playing days in the minors, but his post-playing days have included jobs as a scout, front office executive, and a Hollywood movie or two. Barry, thank you for joining us today for A Visit to the Mound.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's sure good to be here.
Stan, where did you and Stan cross paths first?
Probably at Fort Worth, right?
At Fort Worth, I was doing the player procurement for the team. Fort Worth is was an independent club in the then I believe it was the Central League, and then had just turned to become part of the American Association when the Northern League and Central League merged, and that took up the whole Midwest there from Winnipeg, Canada, all the way to Laredo, Texas. So
that's right.
We were in Fort Worth, and Stan came in to help Wayne Terwilliger, our manager, who I believe at the time was about 82 or 3, and still going strong.
Yep.
But he could use a real good workhorse man like Stan, who could take care of everything from helping him with decisions and player personnel, and working individually with all the players.
Right. That year, by the way, you mentioned Wayne being older. He was the oldest manager to win a championship, is my understanding. So that was kudos to Twig.
It sure was. Yep.
Well,
yes, it was.
You were drafted in the 7th round out of high school by the Giants. Tell us a little bit about your career from that point.
I was an outfielder, and the scout was named George Genovese, who was a Giant scout who I got on a list there, but I was pretty far down it. George's career was signing players like Gary Maddox, Gary Matthews, Dave Kingman, Barry Bond's father, Bobby. Randy Moffett is Billie Jean King's brother. He was a pitcher for the Giants, and on and on.
Yep.
Also managed all 3 Alou brothers, Manny Mota, and I can go on and on with a lot of them. Anyway, Barry Moss got in there way down the list there as a draft pick, and then went to Pepperdine University after that, and was drafted and signed by the Cincinnati Reds. And that's when my playing career, I started with them in 1974 was my first year.
Did you and Pat Zachary, were y'all on the same team?
We were, yes. At one point, we were in AAA together with Indianapolis, and Pat was on his way to the major leagues at that time, and that was one of the big years there, 1976.
Correct.
And, And he went on to have a fine career, and then, of course, was involved in the trade to get Tom Seaver over to the Reds. So
true, that's right.
That's when we first crossed paths. But we had been in spring training camps together 2 or 3 years before that as well. So we'd known each other a little bit.
Well, that's quite interesting. But so you played in the Cincinnati Reds and also the Toronto Blue Jays organization, didn't you?
Yes, I'd been with the Reds and was in spring training, about to go to AAA for a second year, and turned my ankle, popped it out pretty good there with about 2 or 3 days to go in spring training. And in those years, this was in 1978. They had a kind of a injury reserve list like they do now for football mostly.
Right.
Anyway, you can't. You have to be on a roster, and so they didn't have that at that time. But the 2 expansion teams that had previously started, the Seattle Mariners and the Toronto Blue Jays, were able to pick a player if he was put on what would now basically be waivers. And so they had 10 days, and spring training ended. I wasn't able to play for another good week or two. And so, I was sent back home, and then they said, we'll have you, in Indianapolis, or Nashville was the AA team, as soon as you're ready to play. But in the meantime, Toronto called and said they'd put in a claim, but they need to work me out. And John McLaren, who later managed the Seattle Mariners, set me up and worked me out and signed me on the hood of his car. And I wound up with the Blue Jays there and played for 2 years. And then I was a player coach after that. At that time, they only had they had 2 A clubs, and the AAA team was in Syracuse.
Right.
And so, I was late 20s, so didn't have much time left, and they wanted me as kind of a backup outfield, first baseman, DH type player.
So I assume you played at Dunedin then, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I see.
Your baseball reference indicates that you went from like Walla Walla, Washington, to Dunedin, to Utica, New York. I mean, they had you crisscrossing the country.
I covered some ground. I sure did. Yes.
So when you were at Utica, was that when you met Bill Murray?
Yes. So the owner of the team, and in those days, the minor league clubs were either owned by a family or was single owner. And
right.
The owner is named Van Schley, who wanted to just have independent clubs. He didn't really want to be working with an affiliated team and have to take their players and follow their policies and all. So he wanted his own.
Right.
And Utica was what they called a co-op. So we had Blue Jay players on it. We had some Oakland Athletic players, a couple of Cincinnati Red players on there. And so anyway, it was a combined team, and the rest, so about half of the players were with affiliates, and the other half he got to pick himself. And he was pretty skillful at that. And so he put together, I think, 3 years in a row, he was right in contention. And I think in 1983, he won the league championship, which really got some of the minor league directors and scouting directors pretty upset. The Yankees, Mets, Baltimore, and
that was some
other pretty good clubs were in that. So
yeah, that was the NYP league, correct?
Yeah,
that was the New York, Pennsylvania league.
Yeah,
and they kind of bumped. His ownership was he was kind of forced out of his ownership at that time, and
they forced him out instead of firing their guys.
And they worked a situation out with another ownership group, which Van Schley agreed to, and the next year, 1984, Ken Brett was named the manager of the club, and so I believe that was the last year it operated independently, and then I think the White Sox picked up the affiliation with it, and a fairly new stadium. They rebuilt the old stadium. So
now, was Bill Murray actually playing on that team?
Oh, I'm sorry. Bill would come to the games often on during homestands, and the best place for him to stay away from being mobbed is to sit in the dugout. So he would come in and sit in our dugout, coach first base.
Y'all put a uniform on him?
Yeah. Put him, halfway. He'd wear his blue jeans out there and then put the top and the hat on and all. And then,
and I understand his brother was the announcer in the booth,
and his brother Brian Doyle Murray, who was one of the original writers for Saturday Night Live, who actually got Bill on the back in those days in the early mid 70s. Mm-hmm. Brian Doyle Murray was the big brother, and Bill Murray, was catching the breaks from him. And that sure turned around, because now they laugh about it, but now Brian is Bill's brother instead of Bill being Brian. So anyway, but Bill sang the national anthem. He did the seventh inning stretch stuff, and he'd race the kids around the bases and stuff like that. And anything to stay out of the crowd, because once he was in the crowd, it was the game was over virtually. Everybody'd be
paying attention to him instead of the game.
All over him.
And not watching the game and everything like that. And then we'd be out there playing and sliding, and nobody's cheering or anything. So anyway, neat guy, great guy, and, real baseball man, and a pretty good athlete. Golfing at that time, he was shooting par golf, and I know he stayed in the 70s. Well, he may even still be shooting that, but really good golfer. And then he would ask for a little help there during batting practice, and because he always wanted to try to hit one out, which he would do regularly, and put on quite a show no matter what he did or where it went.
Well, he put on quite a show in Caddyshack too.
It's a Cinderella story.
Yep. Cinderella story. That's right.
Yep.
All right, Barry. Let's transition into the Moneyball movie. How did that? Tell us the story about how that all came about.
Well, they were shooting completely true story. They did, use a little political license with some of the characters, but the story was about the Oakland Athletics making a policy move or a change in philosophy from just running it with a scouting system and trying to get the best players and competing with everybody, but always having one of the lowest payrolls. And so they lost in the final in the American League Championship Series to the Yankees. I think then first or second round of the playoffs to the Twins, and they lost to the Angels the last day of the season to go there. Anyway, they were very competitive, but couldn't get to that World Series level. And Billy Beane, the general manager, who Brad Pitt played the part of, decided with the observance of how the Cleveland Indians started to progress during that time. That would be, late 90s and when the Twins were when the Indians were in the World Series, and then the early 2000s when this story was made. So the story was to follow Bill James, the guru statistician for baseball, and one of his proteges, Paul DePodesta, became Billy Beane's number one assistant with all of the new analytic and data material brought into play. And so they decided they would set up not only their major league club, but their entire organization with a high percentage of taking pitches, making the pitcher throw as many pitches as possible, trying to get on base with either walks or a perfect pitch, and setting up the team, position by position, rather than with just great tools players. They all seem to have to fit the same role so that they would be on base and work for on base percentage rather than bunting and stealing bases, and that eventually led to trying to lift the ball and have base runners on base and then to hit a home run rather than singles and doubles and bunting around the field. So that became a book, Moneyball. And then from the book, they decided to make the movie out of it with Brad Pitt as the star, and Jonah Hill became the character, Paul DePodesta. So they worked together as partners in the movie, and it really was very smooth. They're obviously great actors. And so that went well, and Art Howe was played by Philip Seymour Hoffman,
right?
Art Howe, the manager of the club, and that they had some confrontations there between Brad Pitt and not between those two, but as their characters,
correct.
Billy Beane and Art Howe. Anyway, almost the first scene of the movie is the big meeting that the scouting staff is going to have with Billy Beane right after they had lost their season in a 5-game series to the Yankees.
Wait a minute, Barry. How did you come about on this deal? I mean,
how'd you get the role?
Yeah.
So during the first meeting that they did on tape, they used only actors, and they had it all wrong. They had it as it was a corporate company meeting with everybody in suit and ties and briefcases and very businesslike. And that's not the way a scouting meeting in baseball goes. Everybody, wears good clothes, but you're not required suits and ties, and
right.
It's not formal. Guys have spit cups and paper scattered all over, and some foul language is used, and some dugout behavior goes on there because all these guys have been, in baseball as players, coaches, and all that. So it's loose, but it's all business, and it's alive. There's many different things said about players that you would never say outside the room. And,
right.
And so, anyway, this was a very flat meeting that they used for the filming, and it was sitting there, and they then went on to make the rest of the movie, which went very well, and a lot of action and great acting and good characters that were chosen as ball players. Some themselves, David Justice, was in the movie and as himself, and so were some other, players and scouts. And so anyway, the movie was going on, and finally the director came up to one of the actors named Ken Medlock, who used to be a AAA player and then became an actor after his career, and had done numbers of technical advisor roles for baseball movies and commercials. And the director came to him and said, "Ken, we've got to do something about this scout meeting, and it's the start of the movie, and it's flat as can be, and we've got nothing there. We don't know what to do. We've got to put some life into that." So Ken said, "Hey, listen, what you need is me to get 10 of my buddies and bring them out here, and we're all, all together. They're all either scouts or former coaches or former players, and they know what this meeting would be about and how it would go, and you should let them come out and show it to you, and then you decide how you want to handle it." So that's what the director and the writers did. So they brought us, a bunch of us old fellas out there, and some young ones that were still active in the game and all, and said, "Listen, no scripts, say whatever you want. We're just doing one video camera to see what it looks like. Here is Brad Pitt," and he walks in and says, "Hi, fellas, let's, see how this goes." And so we cut up and we had some fun, and we, ran a real meeting, though, telling Billy Bean, Brad Pitt, what players we needed to get, and that there were going to be 3 major players, Jason Giambi, Johnny Damon, and Jason Isringhausen, all leaving for free agency. So they had to be replaced. And so we told them how we would do it with free agents and a couple trades and things like that, which is the reality of what that kind of meeting would be. But it was loose and somewhat fun. And Brad Pitt was going, "This is great," and even asked one of the guys to hand him over a cup so he could chew some of the guy's skull. I haven't had skull since I was a teenager in Arkansas. And, this is great. So he had a good time with it, and the little demonstration went well. And I think there were 12 of us there, and 8 of us were offered positions on doing that actual meeting for the movie. They kept some of the main actors that were in. They didn't bump them off, but they added us to this meeting and said, "Hey, just ad-lib it, and we'll note down what the script will be according to that. You say whatever you want, and we'll tell you what has to be cut out." And so Ken Medlock, who was playing the part of Grady Fuson, who was at that time the scouting director for the Oakland A's, and he and Brad it was designed for them to have a lot of confrontation over this change in policy, and
there was.
and
That was
with
good.
the personnel. So that part of the movie went very well. And then the scenes, they had us do 2 of them, and they went great. And everybody, had a good time with it. And this is something that Brad Pitt did purposely that helped us all out, even still today, because there's still some residuals coming because the movie's shown on airplanes and now Netflix has picked it up and all that. So Brad, when he first came in for the actual movie shoot that they decided to do, he walked up to each new person, all of us scouts in the movie now, and he said, "Hi, I'm Brad Pitt." And of course, we stuck out our hand, and "Hi, I'm Barry Moss," and on around the whole line. And so he kept saying his name and introducing himself, and everybody's kind of looking like, this is kind of funny and all that. And so then as we started the filming, he used our own names, deliberately. And usually you would think that'd be cut out of a movie or, something like, maybe half of the name or something.
Right.
Anyway, he made sure everybody's name was spoken by him, and they kept it. They kept it in the movie, which gave us a credit at the end that said Scout Barry Moss and Scout Ken Medlock and Scout, on and on. And so that got us a little more pay, and it also made it a little more personal. And then he remembered our names, our first names, and we shot that little 2.5 or 3 minute scene over a 3-week period. And every day he'd come in and say hello to each one of us by name.
That's pretty cool.
So that was something very impressive to me, as you can see. And
so you're still
the kind of guy he is.
So you're still getting a little check every time they play it?
Yeah, the movie is still purchased, and with these new companies, Prime and Netflix, and
that's cool.
They're on air. It's on one of the airplane menus. Still keep it, and so each time they renew it, we all get a little residual. Is what it's called.
Bonus.
So.
Yeah, I watch it every time it comes up on my TV.
Same here.
Now that wasn't your first movie.
We had a great time.
Yeah, that wasn't your first movie.
Way back when, I had just finished playing, and the same fella, Ken Medlock, was in a movie called Talent for the Game. And that was a story of a scout and the scout was played by Edward James Olmos. I'm sure if you guys want to go way back, it was started his breakthrough is through Miami Vice with Don Johnson, his partner, and that. And then he's done countless numbers of movies since then. He wanted to play a scout who discovered somebody in the movie. It was Pocatello, Idaho, and it was a young kid who could throw 100 miles an hour. And so he was a very nervous kid, and his father was a minister who didn't want him leaving home to go play baseball and be with a bunch of hoodlums. And so the only guy who could really catch him was Edward James Olmos, who had been a catcher when he was a player. So as the movie goes on, that's how it comes to be, where he sneaks in and catches him in his first major league game, which is a sellout, and they filmed this at Dodger Stadium. And he, winds up being this phenom type player at a very young age, and so the players that were needed for that had to look professional, and so Ken Medlock was the technical advisor for it, and he rounded up all his players then, and I could still play a little third base and throw it around the field. So I'm in the movie as a third baseman with a couple other fellas that played in the major league, Darryl Thomas and Lenny Randall. And we had a few scenes and got some lines in there that were fun. And that one, though, was only shown for maybe 2 or 3 years. And don't see that anymore. But
did you have to become a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and are you still?
Yes. I had, yes, and I had done that actually in a couple of commercials that I had done going back to the 1984 Olympics. I lived in Los Angeles, and they had the Olympics there then that year, and so they did a couple local commercials, and I was in that, in a couple of those, and a beer commercial for Budweiser and a Kodak commercial, and when I did those, then I joined the Screen Actors Guild. So I'm a 40-year member here.
There you go.
Now, so
outstanding.
that's a lot of dues that I've paid them, but they're fun things to do. The commercials, a couple TV shows, and
that's pretty cool,
and the movies. So
Stan tells me, as a scout, you had the opportunity to scout a coconut chunker.
No, that was when I was with the Astros.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Julio Linares, he was a Latin American scout. They sent him down to Brazil or somewhere, and he had to get on a burro and go into the jungle to see this kid throw. He was throwing coconuts, and the kid's name was Ruben Robles, and he ended up being a pretty good ball player, but he knew nothing about baseball. So he got up to AAA. I think that was it.
Okay.
But that's a fact. He had to, Ruben was scouted from Julio Linares went to see him on a burro in the jungle in South America.
Do you have any experiences like that?
Well, I'll give you one. It's not of a kid throwing coconuts, but scouts often take referrals if they get it from a quality person they trust, and so. There was a player, a friend of mine was a junior college coach at Los Angeles City College, and he had a player who could hit like crazy, but was a little average or slightly below at the corners, first base, third base, left field, right field.
Right.
But he did have a good arm. He could run a little. I mean, power, such as the big ones, USC, UCLA, Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, and on. And so I had another friend at Lamar University in Texas, in Beaumont, Texas, who always wanted that kind of player who, didn't have to be the top recruit, but could help his team. So the player's name was Kevin Millar, who now is of Major League Baseball Network fame and played for he played for the Marlins and the Orioles, the Red Sox.
We got about 9 or 10 years in the big leagues, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And good ones. And so I recommended this fellow, without seeing him, to go from junior college to college. And then he played 2 years at Lamar, was very close to getting drafted, but just below it. And at that time, the new independent leagues were just starting, and Van Schley, who I had mentioned before from the Utica team, had bought in with Mike Veck, the St. Paul Saints. So he's asking me for players, and I said, hey, you may want to call Jim Gilligan, the coach at Lamar, and ask about this Kevin Millar. He's, I know he can play 4 positions, and he's a real hitter and all that. He gets signed then by St. Paul. So that's 2 places he's gone with my recommendation, and I still haven't seen him throw a ball or hit a ball. And then this was the mid-'90s. You didn't have the videos on computer yet, so I'd unseen. Gary Hughes, a scout, high-level scout with the Montreal Expos, is looking for some players after the season, and both Van and I recommend this Kevin Millar. Check him out. And so they take him to spring training, and he makes their team and goes to AA. It's his 300 2 years in the Expo organization, and wounds up in that third year Rule of 5 draft, and is taken by the Florida Marlins at that time. And Jim Leland is the manager, and he loves this guy. He's a dirtbag and a hard-nosed guy, but a good pinch hitter, and can use him 4 positions and, pinch hit him with the National League. And so he winds up on the World Series team and gets himself a World Series ring.
That's cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I still had never seen it. That was the first time I ever saw him play. Was on TV in the World Series.
That's pretty good scouting right there, Barry.
So, yep. So then he's offered deals to go to Japan, and Boston jumps in there, and they get him. And so he winds up, going to Boston and 2-3 years there, and that's when they win the World Series.
Yep.
And Kevin Millar gets World Series ring number 2.
How about that?
So at which point I get a phone call out of the blue, and he says, "Hello, I'm Kevin Millar. I'm going to be in Los Angeles, and are you there now?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he goes, "I want you to meet me at the Mountain Gate Golf Course. I know who you are. I know the story behind you recommended me here and there, and it's time for me to shake your hand." And so I got to meet him, and he thanked me. And, scouts don't get that kind of treatment very often.
No, they don't.
So
that's pretty good, Barry. That's a great story.
Around the track. And so he says, anytime you need anything, you make sure you call me. And
I hope you still got his phone number.
What a neat guy.
Well, Barry, I tell you what,
that's probably my best one anyway. But
that's outstanding.
That's a great one.
Well, that's we're gonna have to wrap this up, and I really enjoyed that story too, particularly your playing and scouting career and all that, and you were a lot of help up in Fort Worth, man. Without you, I don't know if we could have done it. Anyway, so
you were the manager of the year, and you won 2 of those championships. Not too often. Yeah, any team wins 3 in a row, and you made it happen for Wayne Terwilliger, and then you won your own 2 years in a row, and nobody's won 3 in a row since. I'll promise you that.
Well, all I could say, it was the best time of my life. And with you helping, it was great.
Well, it was my pleasure, Stan.
I appreciate it. All right, well, here we go.
Yep, that is our time for this episode of A Visit to the Mound. Many thanks to our guest today, Barry Moss. If you have any questions or comments, anything you would like for us to cover, we would love to hear from you. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Visit to the Mound, or on our website at avisittothemound.com. Make sure you like, subscribe, and review this podcast, and be listening the next time we make a visit to the mound. That'll wrap up this visit to the mound. We certainly appreciate you joining us today for a little baseball talk. Anytime you want to hear something about baseball, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can go to roguemedianetwork.com for the next edition of A Visit to the Mound.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.